35 facts about Virginia. All of them real. Most of them sound completely made up. A glowing forest, a sinking island frozen in time. The state that named an entire continent, ran the presidency for 36 straight years, and still has a ghost fleet rotting in one of its rivers. Every single fact you are about to hear is completely real. None of it sounds like it should be. Fact 1. The forest that glows at night. In the Blue Ridge Mountains, under the right conditions on a moonless night, sections of the Virginia forest glow faintly in the dark. The cause is foxfire, bioluminescent fungi that colonize decaying wood. The Blue Ridge has some of the highest concentrations of foxfire-producing species in the eastern United States. When humidity is high and conditions are right, the soft greenish light from rotting logs can make entire stretches of forest look quietly lit from within. It is real, it is strange, and it is genuinely unsettling the first time you see it. Fact 2. Built on a meteor crater. Beneath the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay lies one of the largest confirmed meteor craters in the United States, buried over a mile underground. The Chesapeake Bay impact crater, roughly 35 miles wide, was formed 35 million years ago when an asteroid slammed into the shallow ocean that covered the region. The impact permanently altered the local geology, and many researchers believe it shaped the modern Chesapeake Bay estuary itself. Virginia is literally sitting on top of a cosmic collision. Fact 3. The musical instrument inside a mountain. Luray Caverns in the Shenandoah Valley contains the world's largest natural musical instrument. The Great Stalacpipe Organ uses electronically controlled rubber mallets to strike stalactites of carefully selected sizes throughout the cave, each producing a specific musical tone. The instrument spans 3.5 acres. Mathematician Leland Sprinkle spent 3 years mapping the right stalactites to build it in 1956. The entire cave system is the concert hall. Fact 4. The river older than its mountains. The New River in southwest Virginia is one of the oldest rivers on Earth, and its name is the most misleading label in American geography. Some geologists believe the New River predates the Appalachian Mountains themselves, meaning it was flowing before the mountains were pushed up around it. Rather than being shaped by the terrain, the river simply kept cutting downward as the land rose. It runs north, while every other river in the region runs south. Even the rivers here ignore the rules. Fact 5. A language frozen in the 1600s. The people of Tangier Island speak a dialect closer to 17th century British English than any modern American accent. Cut off from the mainland by the Chesapeake Bay, their speech patterns never blended with the rest of the country. Vowel sounds and grammatical constructions that vanished from English centuries ago are still in everyday use on Tangier. Linguists travel there specifically to document speech that no longer exists anywhere else. It is a language fossil with running water. And that is just the beginning. The next few facts get even harder to believe. Fact 6. The Ghost Fleet in the Potomac. Near the Virginia border, over 200 partially submerged wooden ships rest in the Potomac River at Mallows Bay. Built in a wartime rush during World War I, many at Virginia shipyards, the fleet was never fully deployed. After the war, the ships were burned and scuttled. Today, their rotting hulls are so overgrown that full-grown trees have taken root in the decks. The entire thing is visible from a kayak. Sitting just miles from Washington, D.C., Virginia has a forest of shipwrecks, and barely anyone knows. Fact 7. The Federal Zone of Silence. A stretch of western Virginia falls within the National Radio Quiet Zone, a federally designated area where Wi-Fi, cell phones, and certain household appliances are prohibited to protect sensitive radio astronomy equipment. Communities inside the zone live under restrictions most Americans would find unimaginable. No wireless internet, no cell service, strict limits on electronic devices. It is, by law and engineering necessity, one of the most electronically silent places in the United States. Fact 8. The island sinking into the bay. Tangier Island sits in the middle of the Chesapeake Bay, and it is disappearing. The island has lost more than 2/3 of its landmass since the 1800s, and scientists project it could be uninhabitable within 25 years. Around 400 people still live there, descendants of 18th century English settlers, fishing the same waters their families have worked for generations. The island is simultaneously a community and a geological clock that is almost out of time. Fact 9. The prehistoric forest. The Cumberland Mountain region in far southwest Virginia contains plant communities found virtually nowhere else on Earth. The isolated hollows sheltered species through the last ice age that disappeared everywhere else, and plants once thought extinct have been rediscovered here in the 20th century. Some of the botanical lineages in these hollows trace back to the Carboniferous period, over 300 million years ago. Virginia has a living prehistoric forest tucked in its southwestern corner, and almost nobody talks about it. Fact 10. The wild ponies no one can explain. A herd of feral ponies has roamed Assateague Island off Virginia's eastern shore for at least 300 years. The most popular legend says they are descendants of horses from a Spanish shipwreck in the 1500s. Historians debate the origin, but nobody debates the horses. Every July, in a tradition dating to 1925, the Virginia herd is rounded up by local volunteer firefighters called the Saltwater Cowboys, swum across a channel, and some foals are auctioned to fund the fire department. It is the most chaotic fundraiser in the state. Still with us? Good, because we are only a third of the way through, and Virginia has barely started showing off. Fact 11. The war ended in a living room. On April 9, 1865, Robert E. Lee surrendered to Ulysses S. Grant in the parlor of a Virginia farmhouse. The owner, Wilmer McLean, had previously lived near Bull Run, where Confederate forces used his property during one of the war's first major battles. He moved his family deep into south-central Virginia to escape the fighting. The war found him anyway. McLean said the Civil War began in his front yard and ended in his parlor. In Virginia, you cannot outrun history. Fact 12. The Internet runs through Virginia. An estimated 70% of all global Internet traffic passes through Loudoun County, Virginia, every single day. The Northern Virginia region around Ashburn, known as Data Center Alley, hosts the largest concentration of data centers in the world. Abundant power, deep fiber infrastructure, and proximity to Washington, D.C. made it the de facto backbone of the Internet. When you load a web page or stream a video, there is a very good chance the data passed through a nondescript building in the Virginia suburbs. Fact 13. The ironclad battle that changed naval warfare forever. On March 8 and 9, 1862, two iron-plated warships clashed in the waters off Hampton Roads, Virginia, the CSS. Virginia and the US Monitor. It was the first battle between ironclad warships in history, and it made every wooden navy on Earth obsolete overnight. Admiralties from Britain to France watched the reports in stunned silence. The age of wooden warships, which had dominated naval warfare for centuries, ended in a Virginia estuary over the course of 2 days. The world's navies spent the next decade scrambling to catch up. Fact 14. The deepest canyon east of the Mississippi. Breaks Interstate Park on the Virginia-Kentucky border contains a gorge carved by the Russell Fork River that drops over 1,600 feet, the deepest canyon east of the Mississippi River. The surrounding landscape is so rugged and remote that parts of it were not fully surveyed until the 20th century. Some hollows in the region had no paved road access until the 1970s. It is one of the least visited and most dramatically wild places in the entire eastern United States. Fact 15. The building with its own zip code. The Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia is so large it has its own dedicated zip code, 2301. With 17 miles of corridors, 23,000 daily employees, its own shopping mall, medical clinic, and fire station, it functions as a self-contained city. Built during World War II in just 16 months, it remains the largest office building in the world by floor space. It sits entirely within Virginia, not Washington, D.C., not Maryland. Virginia. Halfway there. But honestly, The second half of this list is where things get really strange. Fact 16. The real first Thanksgiving. On December 4th, 1619, English settlers at Berkeley Plantation in Charles City County held a formal day of Thanksgiving upon landing, over a year before the Pilgrims' 1621 feast in Plymouth. Their charter explicitly required the day to be observed annually. The historical evidence is clear. The Pilgrims got the better marketing and the national holiday, but if accuracy matters, the first American Thanksgiving almost certainly happened on Virginia soil. Fact 17. The state that fought itself. When Virginia voted to secede in 1861, its western counties refused to go along. Those mountain communities had fewer enslaved people, stronger ties to northern trade, and zero interest in fighting for a confederacy they did not believe in. They broke away, and in 1863, West Virginia became an officially recognized state. Virginia is the only state in American history to have had a portion of its own territory formally split off and join the other side mid-war. Fact 18. The man who refused to be king. After the Revolution, a genuine movement arose to offer George Washington the American crown. Some officers and political figures believed the new nation needed a king to survive, and Washington was the obvious choice. He refused twice, first by declining the offer, then by voluntarily stepping down after 2 presidential terms, shocking European observers who expected him to hold power for life. King George III reportedly called it the greatest act of character of the age. Virginia gave America the man who could have been king and walked away. Fact 19. Harriet Tubman's most dangerous route. Virginia was one of the most dangerous states in the entire Underground Railroad network. Escaping from Virginia meant crossing one of the most heavily watched borders in the country, right against the free states of the North. Yet thousands made the crossing, aided by free black communities, Quaker abolitionists, and courageous Virginians who risked criminal prosecution to help. Harriet Tubman ran rescue missions through the Virginia-Maryland Peninsula and never lost a single person she guided. Freedom was close. Getting there was terrifying. Fact 20. The document that wrote the Bill of Rights. George Mason's Virginia Declaration of Rights, adopted June 12, 1776, was the first formal declaration of individual rights by any American legislative body. Jefferson drew directly from it for the Declaration of Independence. Madison used it as a template for the Bill of Rights a decade later. Mason refused to sign the Constitution because it lacked individual protections, and was proven exactly right when those protections were added 2 years later. Virginia wrote the moral architecture of American democracy, and Mason got a fraction of the credit. Keep watching, because what comes next involves spies, a prehistoric forest, and a horse race that started a national obsession. Fact 21. The spy capital of the world. Northern Virginia is home to the CIA, the National Reconnaissance Office, the Defense Intelligence Agency, and dozens of other classified operations. An estimated 85% of the entire U.S. intelligence budget is spent within 20 miles of Washington, D.C., and most of that infrastructure sits in Virginia. The quiet office parks around Tyson's Corner and Chantilly contains some of the most classified work on Earth. Nothing announces what is inside. That is exactly the point. Fact 22. The hidden ammunition factory. The Radford Army Ammunition Plant is tucked into a river valley in southwest Virginia, and most people have no idea it exists. During World War II, it employed over 15,000 workers and produced a massive share of all military propellants used by American forces. It was deliberately designed with internal redundancy so sections could be destroyed without shutting down the whole facility. Sabotage was considered a real threat. The plant still operates today, quietly making propellants for the U.S. military from a valley in the Appalachian Mountains. Fact 23. The town that inspired a nation's capital. Before Washington, D.C. existed, Alexandria, Virginia was one of the most important ports in colonial America and George Washington's home base. When it came time to design the new federal capital, Alexandria was included inside the original boundaries of the District of Columbia. It remained part of D.C. for over 50 years before Virginia reclaimed it in 1847. The land that once belonged to the capital, walked by the Founding Fathers, and debated over by Congress, was quietly handed back, and most Americans have no idea it happened. Fact 24. The largest naval base on Earth. Naval Station Norfolk on Virginia's Hampton Roads waterfront is the largest naval base in the world. It houses more warships, aircraft carriers, and submarines than any other base on the planet. Over 100,000 military and civilian personnel work in the surrounding area. A single stretch of Virginia coastline contains more concentrated military power than most nations possess in total. Norfolk has anchored the Atlantic Fleet since before World War I, and it still does. Fact 25. The island that barely exists. Smith Island in the Chesapeake Bay has a highest natural point of barely 2 feet above sea level. It is losing ground every year to erosion and rising tides. The families who live there are descendants of 17th century English settlers who have fished the same waters for 400 years. They practice traditional Chesapeake Bay oystering techniques that have nearly disappeared from everywhere else on Earth. Their culture, their dialect, and their way of life are being swallowed by the same bay that fed their ancestors. One tide at a time. 5 facts left. Virginia saved some of its most unexpected for the end. Fact 26. The birthplace of country music. Bristol, Virginia is officially the birthplace of recorded country music. In August 1927, talent scout Ralph Pearce set up a makeshift recording studio near the Tennessee-Virginia state line and spent 12 days recording unknown artists, including the Carter Family and Jimmy Rogers. Those sessions became the commercial foundation of country music and influenced everything from bluegrass to rock and roll. The state line runs directly down the main street, so some of those history-making recordings happened in Virginia and some in Tennessee, sometimes in the same session. Fact 27. The capital that moved 3 times. Virginia's capital started at Jamestown, moved to Williamsburg in 1699, and relocated to Richmond in 1780 as British forces threatened the coast. Thomas Jefferson personally designed the new Virginia state capitol, modeling it after a Roman temple in France and commissioning a scale model to be shipped across the Atlantic. For reference, that building, completed in 1788, is still Virginia's functioning state capitol today, one of the oldest continuously operating legislative buildings in the Western Hemisphere. Fact 28. The most elaborate historical theme park in America. Colonial Williamsburg covers 301 acres of restored 18th century city and draws over 1 million visitors a year. What most people miss is the scale of what was done to create it. Beginning in the 1920s, the Rockefeller family funded the demolition of over 600 buildings that did not fit the colonial aesthetic and the restoration of hundreds of originals. The result is simultaneously one of the most historically authentic sites in America and a meticulously manufactured illusion. Both things are true at the same time. Fact 29. The state that fired its own song.
You'll always be our great Virginia. You're the birthplace of the nation.
Virginia is one of the only states in the country to have officially retired its own state song. Carry Me Back to Old Virginia, adopted in 1940, was pulled in 1997 after criticism that its lyrics contained language offensive to African Americans. The state then spent nearly 18 years unable to agree on a replacement, leaving Virginia in official musical limbo. A new state song was finally adopted in 2015. Most Virginians have never heard it. Fact 30. America's first horse race. The first recorded horse race in American history is believed to have taken place in Virginia in 1664. Thoroughbred racing became so central to the Virginia gentry's culture that it shaped the social hierarchy and economics of the entire colony. The wealthiest families measured their status partly through their racing stables, and many of the most celebrated thoroughbred bloodlines in American racing history trace directly to horses bred on Virginia plantations. Virginia gave America its founding fathers and its horse culture. Fact 31. A quarter of the Appalachian Trail. Virginia contains more miles of the Appalachian Trail than any other state, roughly 550 of the trail's 2,190 total miles. Through hikers spend more of their journey in Virginia than anywhere else, and the section has developed its own reputation called the Virginia Blues, the demoralizing stretch where weeks of walking still leaves you deep inside the same state. A full quarter of the entire Appalachian Trail is just Virginia. Fact 32. America's oldest continuously inhabited town. Hampton, Virginia is the oldest continuously inhabited English-speaking settlement in the United States. Founded in 1610, it predates Plymouth Rock by a full decade. It has survived colonial wars, the Revolution, the Civil War, during which it was largely burned to the ground, and 4 centuries of hurricanes and economic upheaval. People have lived there without interruption for over 400 years, making Hampton less a city and more a living artifact. Fact 33. The man who wrote the rules nobody credited. George Mason of Virginia wrote the first formal declaration of individual rights in American history in 1776. Jefferson borrowed from it. Madison built the Bill of Rights from it. Mason himself refused to sign the Constitution because it did not protect citizens strongly enough, and was vindicated when the Bill of Rights was added 2 years later. He never became president, never commanded armies, and is on no currency. But the protections Americans rely on daily trace directly back to a Virginia planter who was right about everything and got almost no credit for it. Fact 34. The President Factory. Virginia has produced more U.S. presidents than any other state, 8 in total. Washington, Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, Harrison, Tyler, Polk, and Wilson all called it home. That is nearly 1 in 5 of all American presidents from a single state. For the first 36 years of the Republic, almost every president came from Virginia. The state did not just participate in building America. For a long stretch, it ran the whole operation. Fact 35. The name that started everything. In 1584, Sir Walter Raleigh named the entire eastern seaboard of North America, Virginia, in honor of Queen Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen. At that point, Virginia was not a state. It was a concept covering what is now the entire east coast of the United States. Over the following 2 centuries, as new colonies were carved off one by one, the name shrank. Massachusetts, the Carolinas, Georgia, all cut from the original Virginia. The state gave pieces of itself away until it became what it is today. It is the original American state, and every other state east of the Mississippi was once, technically, part of it. Virginia is not just a state, it is where America figured out what it wanted to be. From the first English settlement to the last Confederate surrender, from wild ponies to buried meteorites to the internet running beneath its soil, every mile of it is loaded with something strange, something old, or something that never made it into your history textbook. Hit subscribe. There are 49 more states with secrets just like these. Drop a comment. Which Virginia fact hit you hardest?